The National Broadcasting Company, NBC, is one of America's oldest media organizations and is, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, the first permanent radio network and oldest public broadcasting company in the United States. The company pioneered radio entertainment and news before doing the same for television. Thinking back on all the different types of meals you cook, how many of them require chopping, deseeding, or trimming? Knives don't get enough credit in the kitchen, even though they're probably the item home cooks use most of all. The network has been with Americans for almost a century, and any of the country's most beloved cultural and media icons were birthed by NBC, from Star Trek, to Seinfeld, to Saturday Night Live, and the NFL to MSNBC and the Today Show. Anything that old is guaranteed to have lost the remote a few times and possibly even have embarrassed themselves once or twice. NBC's old enough to have made some mistakes it isn't proud of, to have more than a few skeletons in its closet, and, ironic for a media company, more than a few episodes that it doesn't want to be reminded of. NBC fires Star Today Show host Matt Lauer since its 1952 premiere. The Today Show has grown into an NBC mainstay. Helmed for 20 years by Matt Lauer, a marquee name with the network, says NBC, who helped Today remain a ratings powerhouse. Lauer was among the highest paid people in news media, earning $20 million a year in his last contract in 2016. It was his last because the next year, NBC fired Lauer after a review of his behavior prompted by a colleague's accusation of sexual misconduct. The NBC News chairman said Lauer was fired for clear violation of our company's standards. Lauer was accused of showing off his unmentionables at work, sending sex toys to female colleagues, and harassing women for sex. Among the creepier details are that Lauer had a button installed at his desk to remotely close and lock the door to his office, which at least 2 women said Lauer used while alone with them in his office. Perhaps it's because a good set of knives can cost a pretty penny. Although, to be fair, according to Architectural Digest, high-powered executives and celebrity offices often have such buttons installed for people worried about active shooters or the like. Far more lurid and, for NBC, damaging stories about Lauer emerged 2 years later. While some may take umbrage with this, TheRecipesPK notes that investing in a proper set of knives is key. Vanity Fair reported that a former NBC News assistant had accused Lauer of rape and NBC of covering it up, telling a reporter, "She told colleagues and superiors at NBC, but nothing ever came of it." The Today Show's repeated on-air cringes award-winning It May Be, but the Today Show has, no surprise after nearly 70 years on the air, logged quite a few turds alongside their trophies. High-quality kitchen knives are durable and cut down on the amount of time and energy you spend peeling, slicing, carving, or chopping. They're more effective at their job than any cheaper knife would be. Just like any other investment, you need to take care of the product to keep it in tip-top shape. There were plenty of common and understandable mistakes, like that time a hot mic caught a host swearing. With knives, this means sharpening and honing. There were also some experimental, but it was the 50s, so excusable mistakes, like that time they had a drugged chimpanzee co-host, and even some bizarrely catty yet hilarious mistakes, like that time new host Jenna Bush Hager gushed on air about a present from Kathie Lee Gifford, whom she replaced, that was actually intended for her co-host. Matt Lauer had a knack for drawing many of his Today interviewees into visibly uncomfortable conversations. E.T. describes a 2010 interview with Kanye West, in which Lauer had embarrassing video of West playing in the background, agitating the star, and the 2012 interview with Anne Hathaway where Lauer asked her about paparazzi snapping revealing photos of her. There were a few tragic mistakes as well. The good news is good quality knives don't require much maintenance, and learning how to sharpen and hone correctly can easily lengthen the lifespan of your kitchen knives. It's important to understand when your knives need sharpening and when they need honing. When reporting on the death of performer Amy Winehouse, according to E! Today, accidentally aired video of her song, "You Know I'm No Good," with the caption, "You know I'm dead." Kathie Lee Gifford mortified herself in real time when she asked actor Martin Short about how marriage is going and his wife is doing. Simply put, sharpening removes material, while honing physically centers the edge of the knife, via all recipes. During the next commercial break, Short informed her his wife had died 2 years before, and Gifford apologized on air when they came back.
Today Show host Billy Bush was fired for Trump's grab clip. Billy Bush is a junior member of the Bush dynasty, cousin to a governor and a president, nephew to another president. Wisely, this Bush pursued a career outside of politics and has been a successful radio and television personality for over 20 years. Perhaps less wisely, during his time at Access Hollywood, Bush had a very candid behind-the-scenes chat with then TV celebrity Donald Trump, a recording of which made its way into the public 10 years later during the obnoxiously contentious 2016 presidential election. In 2016, Bush had joined NBC's Today, and Donald Trump had become the Republican candidate for president. Though that's the biggest difference between the two, there's still more you need to learn before you go out and purchase a sharpening stone. What's the difference between sharpening and honing? As TheRecipes explains, sharpening and honing are both practices that help keep a knife sharp and effective. Let's start with honing, which helps a knife maintain its sharp edge by pushing the edge of the blade back into alignment. This is more of a routine maintenance. Doing it regularly can help prevent you from having to replace your knives often, and also lessens the need for frequent sharpening. Then there's sharpening, which actually removes dull material from the blade and results in a new, much sharper edge. Just a month before Election Day, barely a year after Bush had joined Today, the audio of Bush and Trump's conversation was leaked to the media. Sharpening is usually only done after trying other knife maintenance options, meaning you've already honed the knife and it still feels and looks dull. Think of sharpening a knife like peeling off a strip of used tape on a lint roller. It's not sticky anymore, so in order to be able to use the roller again, you need to remove the used layer. Bush is heard laughing, reported the Chicago Tribune, as Trump talks about fame enabling him to grope and try to have sex with women not his wife. NBC fired Bush before the end of the weekend, which they didn't even tell him. Sharpening is not something you do frequently. How do you know when a knife is dull? A clear-cut way to tell if your knife is dull is if you notice it's taking you twice as long to cut through ingredients, especially meats. Another way you can tell is by simply looking at and feeling it. It was leaked on a Friday, Bush told CBS, via the Daily Mail, and then Sunday morning I walked. If the knife blade feels soft, dull, or rounded, then it needs to be sharpened, per the kitchen. To go back to work and the driver said, "I'm sorry." Likewise, if you see that the knife has lost its teeth, aka the sharper grooves embedded into the blade of the knife, it is most likely a sign that the blade is misaligned or bent, according to TheRecipes. This is a common issue, and it means your knife needs honing. If you don't want to directly touch a sharp blade, there are 3 other tests you can do to see if your knife blade is dull. They've cancelled the car. According to the Associated Press, Bush now works at Extra, an entertainment news show, where he uses his experience of getting fired to secure interviews with celebrities, getting the flogging and the public shaming. NBC buried the Harvey Weinstein story for decades. Harvey Weinstein was one of the most powerful people in Hollywood before becoming the poster boy for #MeToo and going to prison for multiple sex crimes. The first, The Kitchen explains, is by slicing through an upright piece of white printer or magazine paper starting at the top of the page. Journalist Ronan Farrow's exposé did more than reveal Weinstein's atrocious conduct, however, it also revealed the pernicious influence he had in the media. Weinstein's behavior was an open secret, says Farrow, and Weinstein and his associates used non-disclosure agreements, payoffs, and legal threats to suppress victims' accounts. Although both parties vehemently denied it, Farrow said, per Vanity Fair, that Harvey Weinstein used Matt Lauer blackmail to pressure NBC. Farrow suggests that NBC had basically been covering up for Lauer for years, and Weinstein knew about it. If the knife is able to cut straight down the middle, then it's sharp. Next, try slicing a tomato and onion. Besides being stymied by NBC, Farrow said, according to The Washington Post, that Weinstein had him, and other journalists looking into the story, followed by a group of former Mossad agents, Ukrainian surveillance pros, and European undercover operatives. Entertainment journalist Paula Froelich told WYNC that she personally witnessed an example of Weinstein's corrupting status in the media in 2000 when he assaulted a journalist at a party, in front of other journalists, and nobody reported on it. "People don't want to report on the table. They want a seat at it," she said. Froelich actually wrote about the incident for the New York Post but says that what was published was nothing like what she had written. Brian Williams was demoted for inventing a war story. Brian Williams is an old-school newsman. He started reporting almost immediately after not graduating college before joining NBC News in 1993, where he would stay for the rest of his career. He rose to become anchor of the network's premier news program, NBC Nightly News, in 2004, garnering several Excellence in Broadcasting awards over the following decade in that position. Sharp knives will gently slice through both without force, whereas dull knives will slide off, smash the produce, or get caught mid-slice. How often should you be sharpening your knives? As mentioned above, honing is a technique done frequently to preserve a sharp blade, while sharpening a knife is a technique needed when your knife is at its dullest point and there's no salvaging it, per All Recipes. Kitchen Knife Planet recommends honing a knife after every 3 uses. Nightly News brought in an average of about 9 million to 10 million viewers a night. According to USA Today, Williams was one of the highest paid people in news, and he was a popular mainstay on late shows like The Daily Show. Then multiple Iraq War veterans began publicly questioning a story that Williams liked to repeat about being shot at in a helicopter. Doubt was cast on the accuracy of his story, and other news outlets began examining Williams's reporting. He was accused of inventing dead bodies floating in the streets of New Orleans after Katrina, and NBC started an investigation. So, if you cut meat, chop veggies, then slice a lime for a cocktail, it's now time to hone. It should go without saying, but be sure to thoroughly wash knives in between every use, too. Bryan misrepresented events which occurred while he was covering the Iraq War, said NBC News President Deborah Turnus in a memo to NBC personnel explaining why he was being suspended and demoted. Weep not for Williams, however. After a 6-month suspension, Williams returned to the air as an anchor on MSNBC, where his $10 million annual salary, reports Showbiz Cheat Sheet, remains intact. As of 2019, his net worth is in the neighborhood of $40 million. Innocent terrorism suspect sues NBC despite billions of dollars of advertising and infrastructure, hundreds of millions of people watching, and tens of thousands of spectators watching hundreds of world-class athletes. The 1996 Atlanta Olympics has unfortunately become known for death. 29-year-old Eric Robert Rudolph explains Atlanta magazine, enraptured by hate-filled propaganda denouncing gays, abortion, and the government, planted a series of bombs at the Olympic venues. Kitchen Knife Planet assures that there's no such thing as honing a knife too frequently. However, it does warn that honing a knife for too long during each session can be problematic. Professional sharpening service How Sharp suggests that sharpening a knife should be done about 1 to 2 times a year, provided you've kept up on your honing. 1 person was killed in the blasts, and over 100 more were injured. Richard Jewell was a former cop and security guard at the Olympics. He alerted authorities to a suspicious package stuffed beneath some bleachers. The area was being evacuated as the bomb squad arrived, just before the explosion. To get the sharpest blade possible, you may choose to get your knives professionally sharpened, though it can also be done at home. What is the best way to sharpen and hone a knife? Honing can, and should, be done throughout the week, but it can be easily overdone. How Sharp warns that over-honing a knife can put the knife at risk of folding the teeth of the blade over too far. To avoid this, the professional sharpening company advises to only hone each side of the knife 6 times. This should be enough to put the blade's teeth back into alignment. To hone a knife, you'll need a honing steel, which resembles a long screwdriver with a soft pointed edge. At the 10th anniversary of Atlanta Olympics, the Georgia governor honored Jewell for his heroism on the night of the bombing. Before his bravery was recognized, however, Jewell was subject to an intense media spectacle that basically painted him as the terrorist. In the wake of multiple media reports suggesting he was involved with the plot he helped foil, Jewell sued the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tom Brokaw and NBC News, CNN, The New York Post, and Time magazine. At a 15 to 20 degree angle, hone the knife against the steel. Be careful. Honing at a higher angle can permanently damage the blade. When it comes to sharpening knives, many recommend leaving it up to the professionals. Some of Jewell's lawsuits were thrown out, but according to the Wall Street Journal, NBC was among those who settled, reportedly paying him over $500,000, far more than the nuisance value that is occasionally offered to potential plaintiffs. Tom Brokaw had to apologize for telling Latinos to learn English. One of America's Big Three news anchormen for 2 decades. Legendary broadcaster Tom Brokaw started with NBC in 1966 and only announced his retirement in January 2021. All Recipes reports that folks who want to sharpen knives at home should stick to a sharpening stone over electric sharpeners, which can be too harsh. Similar to honing, you want to angle the edge of a blade at 20 degrees against the sharpening stone. Then, carefully, apply pressure and guide the blade across the stone from the heel to the tip. Do this 5 times. He's penned several best-selling books and received numerous awards in journalism, and per NBC, Brokaw was the only anchor to have helmed all 3 of NBC News' flagship programs, Today, Nightly News, and Meet the Press. Brokaw was even awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor a president can bestow on a civilian, by President Obama in 2014. If the knife is still dull, repeat 5 more times. When should you hone versus when should you sharpen? By now, the difference between honing and sharpening a knife has probably been drilled into your brain. That being said, let's get into when you should hone versus when you should sharpen your knives blades. Honing, at its core, is there to keep the blade aligned. But 5 years later, he was made to apologize for telling Latinos to learn English. During a live panel discussion on NBC's Meet the Press, on then-President Trump's proposed border wall in 2019, Brokaw repeated sentiments from people he spoke with that were concerned with intermarriage, and if they want brown grandbabies, and then expressed personal feelings, according to NBC, that the Hispanics need to work harder at assimilating, speaking English and learning to be comfortable in other communities. The online backlash was swift, and NBC's social media was flooded with angry lambastings and excoriations of Brokaw's statement as ignorant at best, if not outright xenophobic. Similar to how you prepare your veggies for eating or cooking by washing, chopping, or peeling them, you prepare your knife for slicing by keeping it honed. You should sharpen your knife when you see irregularities or dents in the blade or if your knife has a broken tip. I am sorry, truly sorry my comments were offensive to many, Brokaw said on Twitter. You should also sharpen your knife if it's still tough to cut through food, even after honing. The great enduring American tradition of diversity is to be celebrated and cherished. The extreme failure of the XFL was a bold, some said doomed, joint venture between NBC and wrestling tycoon Vince McMahon that sank millions of dollars into a new professional football league. Organizers wanted to name their league the Extreme Football League, said the Washington Post, but they decided, as a different league already had that name, that the X was supposed to stand for anything but the NFL, which they considered to be stuffy and boring. XFL games were, according to Business Insider, designed to be more, well, extreme. The cheerleaders wearing less and league rules, making the game more violent, were features of everything McMahon said about the XFL and adorned every piece of suggestive league advertising. Honing is like tuning up your car. It helps the blade cut better and smoother. Sharpening, on the other hand, is like giving your car a brand new engine or battery. Teams were given names like the Memphis Maniacs, and individual players encouraged to have catchy nicknames like "He Hate Me." Plenty of people were skeptical, and a February 2001 Sports Illustrated cover asked, "Will sleazy gimmicks and low-rent football work for the XFL?" Unfortunately, no. Your knife now has a new lease on life. It's practically brand new. McMahon spent too much time hyping his league and not enough developing it, said Business Insider. After all the flashy commercials and crazy antics, McMahon built it up so much, and left so little time for players to train, that by the time the games aired, they were a letdown. In the end, the XFL didn't last more than a season and, according to ABC, lost NBC and McMahon $70 million. McMahon rebooted the XFL in 2020, but NBC is not participating. NBC apologizes for airing edited audio of 911 call 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed in 2012, by George Zimmerman. Prior to the shooting, Zimmerman had been following Martin and called 911 to report Martin as suspicious. In their coverage of the events, NBC aired what many people called an edited out-of-context cut of that 911 call. During their broadcast, Zimmerman is heard saying, "This guy looks like he's up to no good. He looks black." What NBC's viewers didn't hear, however, as the Christian Science Monitor describes, was the 911 dispatcher asking, "Okay, and this guy, is he black, white, or Hispanic?" Then Zimmerman answered, "He looks black." NBC publicly apologized to Zimmerman, saying that, "It became evident that there was an error made in the production process that we deeply regret." According to The Hollywood Reporter, NBC fired at least 3 journalists involved in allowing it to air. Zimmerman sued NBC for defamation, explains the Monitor, alleging that NBC's editing made him appear to be racist and opened him up to public ridicule and threats, which resulted in emotional distress and anguish. 2 years after Martin was killed, a judge threw out Zimmerman's lawsuit. The court ruled that since he had pursued a course of conduct that ultimately led to the death of Martin, Zimmerman had become a public figure and thus needed to prove that the network had acted with malicious intent, the standard required to prevail in a libel suit involving a public figure. Dateline faked an exploding car for a story. Rumor swirled in 1992 that GM's new line of Chevrolet pickups had a bad habit of exploding on impact. That November, NBC's new investigative news program, Dateline, aired an hour-long special report on the subject, according to Entertainment Weekly, titled, "Waiting to Explode?" With a name like that, several NBC producers apparently thought, the program had better show some explosions. So, says EU, to try to ensure dramatic footage, the show's producers allowed incendiary devices to be strapped to trucks for a crash test demonstration. Viewers watched in horror as a test vehicle burst into flames after a crash. GM executives, however, watched in outrage. They immediately sued NBC and yanked all GM product commercials off the network. NBC apologized profusely. Both Dateline anchors had to give a 3.5-minute formal apology on air. Then the network executives launched an investigation. "Understand us clearly," said the NBC president in a statement, reported the Baltimore Sun. "A piece of bad journalism went out over our air. It reflected neither our character nor our intent. ... It must not happen again." 3 Dateline producers were forced to resign, and the on-air correspondent who reported the GM story was demoted. NBC's internal investigation ultimately concluded that recent downsizing and cost-cutting resulted in a fundamental breakdown in the editorial process. NBC and Tina Fey apologized for Tracy Morgan's outburst. The sitcom, 30 Rock, was an award-winning, long-running star of NBC's primetime lineup. Running for 7 seasons, 30 Rock was a satirical take on the experiences of the show's star, writer, and producer, Tina Fey, as head writer for another NBC property, Saturday Night Live. The crew of 30 Rock was dotted with SNL alumni, from the writing staff to the producers, but mostly notably by Fey's fellow star comedian, Tracy Morgan, who was only supporting cast but frequently stole the show as well as occasionally making the wrong kind of headlines. Morgan got his start as a stand-up comedian and never stopped, even when while filming 30 Rock, performing live. At a 2011 comedy show in Nashville, Morgan made a joke that was widely criticized as homophobic, and NBC was quick to distance themselves from their star's comments. Trass's comments reflect negatively on both 30 Rock and NBC, two very all-inclusive and diverse organizations, said an NBC executive, according to the Today Show, and we have made it clear to him that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Morgan apologized as well, and Fey hoped his apology would be accepted but added, "Stand-up comics may have the right to work out their material in its ugliest and rawest form in front of an audience, but the violent imagery of Trass's rant was disturbing to me." Saturday Night Live over and over again, Saturday Night Live was, show creator Lorne Michaels said to Rolling Stone, designed to be a comedy show, frank and intelligent, for young, urban adults. The show was supposed to be risky, irreverent, and relevant. Topical comedy and popular music amid the perils of performing live. In fact, Michaels demanded that it be a live show in part, because if they saw it beforehand they'd say, "You can't do that on television." It's no surprise, then, that a show explicitly created to take comic chances would end up making controversy. There are the number of times that, SNL, cast members, writers, and guest stars have had to apologize for saying or doing all manner of offensive, hilarious, you decide things. There was that time they mocked the murder of a skier with a skit composed of stock footage of skiers tumbling to a soundtrack of gunshots. Paul Schaefer told Entertainment Weekly that he thought his career was over when he made history by dropping the first ever F-bomb on SNL in 1980. According to the Associated Press, 6 years later, NBC courted controversy by censoring guest comedian Sam Kinison's weed joke from airing on the West Coast broadcast of SNL. Rap group Cypress Hill was banned, so far permanently, says Far Out, for smoking a joint during their performance. There is, of course, also the constant drumbeat of backstage drama as well, which, as Ranker describes, sometimes spilled over into headlines and caused actual backstage fistfights. Seinfeld insulted Puerto Ricans so bad that NBC banned an episode. Seinfeld was a juggernaut in sitcom history. Over its 9 seasons, the infamous Show About Nothing was nominated for 186 different awards, winning 74, including 27 Emmys. And the show has staying power. According to Saros, when Hulu had exclusive rights to Seinfeld, the average age of their Seinfeld viewer was 27, meaning they were in 2nd grade when the finale aired. The show has since moved to Netflix, for which, The Wrap reported, Jerry Seinfeld was paid over $100 million. Vulture calculated the worth of the Seinfeld financial empire, since it entered syndication at over $3 billion. Lucre that Jerry has tried to freeze his co-stars out of, Jason Alexander told the Globe and Mail. The eponymous star's contemptible business practices aside, and ignoring the plethora of his and his co-stars' unrelated naughtiness, Seinfeld was actually relatively controversy-free. There is, of course, an outlier. A Seinfeld episode in which Kramer burns a Puerto Rican flag on accident was so offensive that everyone involved apologized, and the network pulled the episode from syndication for 4 years. The Puerto Rican Day aired in 1998, and, the episode so incensed New Yorkers, reported the New York Post, especially Hispanics, that it was yanked from syndication in the New York market until 2002. NBC turned off a close football game. A close 1968 American Football League game pitted the Oakland Raiders against the New York Jets. It was an intense, back-and-forth game, with each team stealing the lead from the other 6 times, according to NPR, before it was all tied up. A lot of penalties and timeouts had dragged the game time a bit long. With just over a minute of play to go, the Jets got a field goal, taking the lead by 3. With just under a minute left, the Raiders got possession and, in a stunning turnabout, scored twice in 9 seconds, winning the game 43-32. Unfortunately, most of the country didn't get to watch it because NBC switched to their regularly scheduled programming. So, except for people actually in the stadium, along with viewers on the West Coast, because of time zone differences, instead of seeing one of the greatest upsets in football history, fans stared in agony as a little girl with braids in the Swiss Alps starts walking down a hill. According to History, Heidi was a film NBC executives were sure would win them high ratings during November sweeps. They apparently didn't anticipate angry football fans calling the network to complain. As sports journalist Dave Zurin told NPR, men who would not get out of their armchairs for earthquakes made their way to the phone to call in to NBC. The infamous debacle is now known as the Heidi game.